And good morning. We are live with another Uncitizen with Unpublic with Citizen Stewart. I got to get my words right this morning. Today, we want to talk again about the continuing controversy that we have in schools and classrooms with understanding how we can truly be inclusive of all students, all families, all parents, even all teachers and educators in our schools that are meant to serve everyone. We have schools that are supposed to provide one education, but for many peoples. The United States is rare in terms of countries, in that we're not a homogenous people. We're a pluralistic nation. We have people of all different backgrounds, and that includes religious backgrounds, philosophical backgrounds, creeds, colors, you name it, different heritages, and different histories. But how can we bring it all together into one school system or into any classroom where we're going to have multiple groups of people who don't always agree on everything? The way that this is ending up right now is we're doing the nasty thing. We're doing the ugly American thing, which is we're pulling apart and we're having people that want to pull to their separate corners and be right rather than win. For all of us, they just want to be right. They want to have one version of history to teach. And of course, it's the right version, their version. They want to have one history of America to teach. Of course, it's the right history. Of course, we know that that's never going to work out. The demographics of the United States are changing in ways to where that will be a fool's errand to keep trying to push a single story, a single history, a single way of teaching. I'm going to bring in someone who's going to help me understand this better on the other side. As always, I bring you guys educators, good educators who can help us understand the world, because sometimes we just too stupid to understand it ourselves. I hate to put it that way, but damn, we stuck on stupid right now in the news. Right on the other side of this, we're going to bring in our guest and we will start the discussion. And we are back. Let's have at it. Good morning, fam. Today we want to talk about critical race theory, but not really critical race theory. We just want to talk about the smart way to handle America's tapestry of peoples in classrooms. Because I hate just using terms when we don't have to use terms, and jargon when we don't have to use jargon, because it sends us off thinking down the wrong path. So my guest today can help us understand this. Kwame Sarfo-Mensah is the founder of Identity Talk Consulting, LLC, an independent educational consulting firm that provides professional development and consulting services globally to educators who desire to enhance their instructional practices and reach the utmost potential in their classroom. That is a hell of a bio, brother. Good morning.
Man, good morning, Chris. How are you, sir?
I'm trying to keep my head on straight and be a thinking person at a time where we're having a global problem that would be enough to think about by itself. But because I care about education, the whole world is on fire with wildfires and floods and everything that in the book of Revelations we were told was coming.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
it's at this moment that we decide to have a fight about schools, about like what kids should learn in classes or whatnot. I would love to ask you at the very beginning of this. There's so much that's been said about critical race theory in the fight already. I don't want to retread all of it. But do you see a path forward for educators to kind of stick to their craft and not get lost in the politics outside of them?
I believe there is an opportunity, but before I even answer that question, I have to say this before, we really dive in. Man, I admire just the work that you do, and it's just an honor to even contribute my voice to the Bright Green Network. So just thank you for all you do.
That.
And, it's an honor to even be sharing space with you. So now let me answer your question. I believe that we have an opportunity as educators to do something historic, to do something unprecedented. And what I mean by that is, we've known for years that our schools were never designed for Black and brown children to thrive, because the schools that we find ourselves going through, K-12 system, higher ed, whatever level you want to go with, a lot of it's all rooted in whiteness, right? even as we went through these same systems growing up, we did things that maybe didn't make sense at the time, but you did it because that was what the rules were, right? No one told you to talk back to a teacher or to question, what the teacher, said to you. I come from a Ghanaian family where you just respected authority, even if you didn't understand the rule, even if the rule
Mm,
didn't make sense. That was that was how I was brought up, and it actually translated into the way that I came into education. Because when I started teaching 15 years ago, I went through the teacher training program at Temple University. So shout out to Temple University,
mm,
Philly all day. And I didn't really learn anything from that program. I just kind of went through the motions. I knew that I had to take these classes in order to get my degree, which would then give me my certification. So this is like in the thick of NCLB, so No Child Left Behind, for those who don't know. So you had to get your degree, you had to get your certification before you can even go into a classroom. So this is mid 2000s, around there, and I started my career just being happy to be there. Like I was happy to have my own
mm,
classroom. Man, I was just happy to be in a position to have an impact, a positive impact on children, but specifically Black and brown children. But what's crazy is the way that I was going about doing it was very much entrenched in white supremacist behavior, you know, making students, walk in lines, having students stay quiet in class, even if it was, productive noise, right? They might be a little bit loud, but they're still learning. Like I was subscribing to those white supremacist norms and trying to get my students to adhere to those norms. And I
mm,
didn't realize that at the time because when I was growing up, my teachers did the same exact thing to me.
mhm,
So when I
mhm,
became an educator, I thought it was normal for students to walk in the line. I thought it was normal for students to to code switch, right? I thought it was normal for students to be sitting in rows and not in circles or some other seating arrangement. So all these things that we talk about, with dress codes and everything else, like I thought it was normal because that was the same system I went through for 12 years. Well, right? So
13,
so
yeah.
well 13 if
Yeah,
you include kindergarten. Sorry,
yeah.
13.
My
But
favorite grade, man. You can't leave my favorite grade out.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I do believe that we have an opportunity to really fight what's going on. And you mentioned this before with critical race theory, for instance. Now, I'm not a critical race theorist.
Mhm, mhm,
All I know about critical race theory, I had to learn from, my friends in academia who are actual, you know, people who studied CRT, and they studied this for a number of years. So it
mhm,
takes years to really learn the depth of critical race theory. Like for me, I'm just scratching the surface. I mean, I actually enrolled in the CRT summer school that just happened with the African American Policy Forum with
mm,
Dr.
mhm,
Kimberly Crenshaw and all
mhm,
the
mhm,
other presenters. So I was actually able to partake in that and just to learn more about it, um, just so that I can use that to be in better position to fight and combat against all the propaganda and all of what's happening right now with CRT, but also with all these anti-trans bills that are just being thrown out there. So
Yeah,
there's
I
a
mean, like
test.
it's grown beyond CRT now.
Yeah,
And if our educators aren't prepared to help our young people, where they're not going to actually, they're going to be disabling young people. I mean, we have in a couple of instances that I've seen already, literally parents that are arming their kids with the iPhones to take to take recordings of teachers if they veer into anything that sounds like so-called CRT. My real kind of problem with how we're responding to that is that we're not making distinctions that help the public understand what's at play. So CRT being a legal scholarship analysis framework for understanding how laws and race intersect with each other and how racism gets embedded in law. That is a great first, second, third year college discussion to have, and have at her, right? Like with that discussion. But when people start in the public and journalists and others start attaching Marxism and stories about, you know, the bigger America or whatnot to that discussion, they're trying to lead us astray, because really what they're getting at is they don't like ethnic studies. They don't like Black studies. They're very uncomfortable with LGBTQ coursework or lesson plans or activities. They don't like efforts that are meant to increase inclusion and diversity and making our classrooms comfortable for everybody by decentering the old school, long-standing white norm default. The default in everything in schooling is whiteness and has been white. And they're not fighting for their rights as white people to not be harmed in the tradition or in transition to a more of color pluralist vision. They're fighting for the whiteness to not be discentered. They're fighting to have their single story, the way they see America, the way they see our Constitution, the way they see our history, be the one and only. I want to give an example, like, because you said something as you were talking about how we have went through these systems ourselves. And like fish, we took up some of the water and we swam in the water, didn't know the water was all around us, right? We were taking in messages. And of course, if we become educators, we're going to repeat some of that, right? But I just want to give one example, because as you were talking, I looked this up because it came up just last night in talking with my kids about my schooling experience years ago. We talked about public education, or I'm sorry, PE, physical education.
Yep.
And we were talking about what they were going to do this year. And they were giving me a hard time about what they have to do in PE. It's a hot mess. You know, if they do volleyball, they only do it for 3 days. The first day, all they do is, you know, play with the ball back and forth. And the second, and they never get to play, like, really. So as they're complaining about that, I'm like, well, at least you weren't back in my day when we all had to take square dancing in public in physical education. And they were like, square dancing, and they thought that was the funniest thing ever. And it hit me. My wife had taken square dancing. I had taken square dancing. We were in totally different parts of the country, right? Two very different parts of the United States. And it was like, oh yeah, you know what? That was a thing. That wasn't like just a one-off I had in my schools. It was a national thing. Well, how did it become a thing? I didn't discover until years later that the reason that we were all doing square dancing in schools is because there were forces in the United States that were afraid that jazz was corrupting the youth, and Black music and Black people were about to take over. And Henry Ford poured a ton of money, millions of dollars, into making square dancing the thing that would be like a cultural firewall from people becoming too Black. And to stop the corrupting forces of jazz, Black jazz, from taking over. And all the Black dances, you know, the Black dances were considered to be obscene, and they were corrupting white kids. And, you know, so they passed between 1973 and I forgot what year, there were even bills passed that tried to make square dancing the official dance of the United States, right?
What?
And we were all taught this in school. We took square dancing in school, not knowing that somewhere there was some rich people who had decided that that Black people were corrupting America with their dancing and with jazz, and there needed to be a pushback to the square dancing. I mean, to the jazz dancing craze or whatnot. And the way to do that was through America Public Schools. Let's just make kids square dance and make it get back to wholesome white values. Square dancing, what's more wholesome than that? And they went to pass laws in like 20, 30 states to make folk dancing or square dancing the folk dance of America, right? We didn't know this as we were doing this, as little Negro children were dancing around doing damn square dancing, that this was a plot. This is just something that we had to do in our schools and in our classes or whatnot. That those type of histories, they can repeat themselves. We could keep repeating stories like that. Now we're at a time where we're trying to reverse those things. We're trying to push them back and go the other direction. And just the slightest movement the other direction, where we start saying we are going to treat all children as human beings and their cultures and their history and their background, is too much for this group of people to handle. So educators, I think, have to be aware of, you've written about this, how educators have to ask themselves the question, am I participating in some way, shape, or form? And I forgot all the questions. You have a piece about questions that educators should ask themselves. And I think, did you freeze there? I hope you're not frozen on just my end, because now I'm talking to you and I just see you're frozen there. I think we may have frozen with our guest there. Maybe my example of the square dancing was just too hot to handle. I'm going to keep going then. And then as Kwame comes back in, we will get back at this. But this point that I'm making right now, I just want to say, instead of arguing about CRT, because we don't want to gaslight ourselves. We know for sure that that over time, our kids have been given a single white American story. We have had textbooks that teach them all the wrong things about the past, about history, about we call enslaved people, we call them workers and immigrants, Black immigrants. And we talk about their conditions as having been they were well fed and taken care of, and they were very valuable to us, whatever. We have done that for generations, teaching our kids that nonsense, which is really, really a cry for reversal. We have to reverse that. We have to go the other direction. We have to start teaching our kids the reality of our history. So instead of just making it about these words like decentering whiteness or CRT or whatnot, we have to be more specific than that. We have to talk about these things like the square dancing example, about how we have embedded and layered in wrong stories that have done damage and hurt to generations of people who happen to not be white going through public schools. And when we hear the other side talk to us about like, oh, well, you're trying to divide us, by bringing this up. Well, first of all, define us. Define us. Who are we trying to divide? Let's be more specific than, oh, they're trying to divide us. Let's put us in air quotes and say, well, interesting. Well, which us is this? Are we trying to divide LGBTQ students, Chicano students, Mexican students, Black students, brown students of all sorts, biracial, multiracial students? Are we trying to divide them by adding their voices and their heritage into the system? It seems like there's only one group that is defined by that air quote, us. We're trying to divide us. It's super interesting to me. Kwame, I see you back, brother. I didn't know if I was just talking into the ether or not, but it's good to have you back. I just said a lot, man. I just said so much. So,
a lot of good stuff. You said a lot of good stuff, but let's take it from where you said us, right? We live in the United States. We live in the U.S., but the U.S. doesn't represent us. Even though when you look at, the beginnings of the country and, all men created equal and the Pledge of Allegiance and everything, it doesn't represent us as a collective. So as far as what we need to do to address this, I think we have to just break it down into simplest terms. So, yes, the talk is all about CRT and it's all about, all these anti-trans bills. But you know what, though? It's not really about CRT. It's what you mentioned before. It's really about white people being able to maintain their power in this hierarchy. in terms of different races. Um, so I think what we need to do is get back to the basics. This is about humanizing people, right? It's all about humanizing people.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about intersectionality, that's a term that's been thrown out there lately. It's about embracing people's differences, whether it's their origins, whether it's their religion, whether it's their race, gender, sexual orientation, what have you. And this is something that we talk about. We've always talked about this in our schools, even growing up. When we start, when we go into class, or when we go into our and we see our new classmates, our teachers always tell us, "Hey, like, you know, respect people the way you want to be treated." Right? That's always a rule or a norm in every class I've been in. Um, so it's interesting how when we talk about the importance of intersectionality, the importance of understanding that none of us are monolithic um, within our different racial groups or ethnic groups or what have you. Like we all have different experiences. So my experience as a black man is going to be different from yours, right? Because of the fact that my parents, they actually came from Ghana, West Africa. But then I have friends who were born in the States. They don't really know what their connection is to the diaspora. And as a result, our differences are just going to be different, in terms of that. But I don't know. I just feel like we just can't get caught up in the language. You don't know what critical race theory is? So what? You don't need to know because that's something that you don't learn till college.
Mm-hmm.
But do you need to apply a critical race lens to what you do as an educator? Yes. That and what's crazy is, Chris, is a lot of us already do this work, but because we are deterred by the language, we're figuring out, man, how do we apply critical race theory to our schools? It's putting us in a state of inaction. It's taking us away from the work that we've been doing. So, what does that look like to apply a critical race lens? Okay, don't just diversify your bookshelves, you have to decolonize them as well. So, it's not enough to just have different faces and different shades of colors on your bookshelf. Are you reading these books? Are you perusing them to see if they are, um, reinforcing stereotypes, negative stereotypes about different groups? Um, are you taking the time to vet your instructional materials? Are you taking the time to vet your instructional practices? Are you looking at your school's policies to see which rules, um, which procedures or protocols put students of color at a disadvantage compared to their white counterparts? So there's a lot that goes with doing this work with a critical race lens. But because we've been so caught up with just acronyms and the language, it's taken us away from what we have to do. So I think I'm all about keeping things simple. So whenever, I write, my articles regarding this or anything, I try to do it from a place of from the role of a student who's also trying to learn these things, but I also want to share what I'm learning with the people who do read the articles and the blogs so that they can acquire this information. Because in the end, if we're going to, if we're fighting for liberation, it has to be done collectively. It has to be done collectively. And even if we have disagreements or we have differences of perspective and thought, as long as we're on the same page with what we need to do to be liberated, um, then that's really what's important. So I think for me, and I'll say this, like when, like for instance, I'll take Eight Black Hands for instance. What's great about y'all is you're able to argue about all these different issues, regardless of the fact that y'all may have different political affiliations or you may have different perspectives on different topics. The fact that the bottom line is the same for everybody, that's what allows the fight for liberation to continue because
Mm.
everybody's on code. And I think sometimes, especially within the Black community, we put each other's blackness on trial, you know, trying to, assign our criteria to what blackness is based on our experiences, and we try to impose that on each other. And then that's where the infighting comes. And then you have white folks who are looking at us like, man, we ain't gotta do nothing. They fighting against each other. We just gotta just
Yeah.
sit there and eat some popcorn while they, dismantle each other. So I think there's a lot there that we have to do, but it's not impossible. We just have to realize that this is a moment of time, for us to act on what's going on. Because if we don't, this is going to persist. And man, they've been coming with some uppercuts.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at this beautiful little girl that you got in your lap here.
Boy,
Little boy, all right, that you got in your lap here. And I'm thinking to myself, what would I care about in all of this discussion right now? Like everything that we're talking about, like right now, does it matter if it doesn't matter to him, right? Like if it doesn't matter to, because you are trying to raise a fully, a free, first of all, a free person, like a fully free human being, right? So I think you have to worry about, like I have to worry about, like the 8 Black Hands have to worry about, like everybody else has to worry about what's going to happen between this age and where you are and your age. There's going to be a series of things that are going to happen. There are going to be some lessons. There are going to be some experiences. There are going to be some things. So what you have to worry about might be different than what somebody else has to worry about, right?
Exactly.
Like in this country, right? And I think you have to be pretty ignorant as a person who doesn't have that as a fear to not know that that's what a good portion of America is having to live through every day. Like we have like literally physical kids that we're responsible for, that the world is about to try and corrupt their hard drive. Like God made them born like with everything that they need, but the world's going to try and corrupt their hard drive. And we as fierce defenders, like you have it worse because you're an educator and you're responsible for the raising of a human being, right? So like you have it double because you've got other people's children in your hand and you have to defend them from like being miseducated, right? Like by the system and others. I won't put too much pressure on you, to get it right as an educator, but I think we get we get lost. The children that we have that are real breathing children who deserve everything in life, we get lost in the political part of the discussion and forget that it's all about this child right here, right? Like this at the end of the day, this ends all arguments. There is no argument. This is a gift of God right here, who is going who's going to need a ruthless kind of defender and guardian ahead of the things that are coming down the pipe. There are going to be these things coming down, and we talk about we use words like microaggression, for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think we should just unpack what that means sometimes and stop using words and just start using the reality of like, what are we, what media are they going to consume? What stories you wrote a thing about like our counter storytelling needing to be one of our superpowers, right?
Yes.
Well, that starts with our own kids. Like, what stories are we going to tell them to help them counter the stories they're about to hear? You know what? Let me name a couple stories I hate. I hate the sidekick story. The story that you were born to be a sidekick. And you know what? They're going to read so many stories that make them the sidekick, right? I hate the comic foil story, which means you were born to be the comic foil, but you weren't born to be the one who figures out the problem. Well, do a scan of all the media available to our children. I don't have the graphic right now. I've brought it up with Sharif El-Mekki before, but it's almost like if you're a white child, like something like some crazy 90-something% of all the characters you're going to see that are the leads The protagonists, the ones who figure out the problem in the story or whatnot, are going to be white, or an animal.
Mm-hmm.
Better representation of animals and dump trucks than there are of people of color in children's literature, right? And I don't know what we do about that, but I'm glad to see that. Like this is what I love about my show. Like, let's get back to what the real story is about. This child right here has an entire future of like worth defending right now before there are even any problems. But I can guarantee that there are going to be problems. As a person who's going to my fourth decade as a parent, I have just been obsessed with the many ways I was lied to by the world,
Mm-hmm.
by media, by teachers, by schooling, that I didn't find out until my teen years and my early 20s that I had been lied to in so many ways. And then I became a parent, right? And when I became a parent, it just became apparent to me that this was going to happen again and again and again. It's cyclical. I want to get your opinion about something too, because let's take it back to the classroom. Let's
Okay.
take it back to schools, right?
Yep.
Because I don't understand why we're arguing about all this stuff, like CRT and these other things, as if the tide really has turned so far that now we have to start protecting white people from these, unwashed people of color and trans people and everything out. It's not as if we're still seeing stories like mock slave auctions and racist lessons still taught in the classroom that traumatize and dehumanize Black students. It's not as if we're still seeing these things, right, in our classroom. It's not as if teachers in Iowa are still giving assignments of pretend you are a Black slave to students without realizing if you are a child of color in that classroom, like what's going on. We're talking about protecting white children, but and think about our own kids who are still facing these type of things. This is an oldie but goodie. I like to keep going back to this one. There's a program made by PBS that is called Flight to Freedom. Flight to Freedom is a social studies virtualization that program that is used in classrooms. 12-year-old girl came home, told her mom that she was made to play a video game at school that put her in the role of Lucy, the slave. And the way that you get coins throughout the game to win is you encounter a bunch of white people who ask you questions. And if your responses are deferential enough, you earn coins and you eventually earn your freedom by being complicit, by being, whatever. So
Wow.
they've virtualized and gamified slavery. And this was being used in the Minneapolis public schools. This is how it came to our attention. It was being used in the Minneapolis public schools. Come to find out, it was being used across the country in different classrooms or whatnot. And it was created by PBS. But this is the same Minneapolis that when this came up, they didn't take it out of the schools. They just made it optional after that. Even after the uproar and activists came to the district and said, you are not going to virtualize slavery. Right, like this is just dumb. You're not going to have people playing a game where they win by being better slaves, right? And they're like, yeah, we'll take it out, except for we'll just make it voluntary. Not even a year or two later, they got busted for having a literacy program with books that were like about Lazy Lucy, and they had all the like worst depictions of people of color, even though the program itself was supposed to be really good, literacy program or whatnot. These are the things that we're still fighting in the classroom today, as we argue about how we're making white kids uncomfortable. What's your solution for this? How can you attack this and not make your white students uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form? I don't have to teach, but you do. You're an educator. So, tell me how you address that.
Well, just to be honest, throughout my whole career, I've worked in predominantly Black and Latinx neighborhoods. So I've encountered very few, white people in my years in the classroom. But in the years where I've had, white people, I don't change who I am. I'm still going to teach the way that I need to teach for everybody. And when I say everybody, that includes white people too, because when I teach for my black and brown students, my students of color, I'm also teaching for white people as well, because in the end, it's an opportunity for them to get this counter narrative that I'm trying to share every day with my students. It's an opportunity for me. Now does that mean that it's going to get through to them every time? No. Are they going to be deferential at times? Sure. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to deter me. I'm not going to alter the way that I operate the classroom because there's some white folks in here. I'm still going to talk the way I need to talk. I'm still going to speak the truth, because the truth
So
has been
how are you going to
hidden
handle
from
it
us.
when that comes back to you, though? How are you going to handle it then when you sitting in a principal's office or someone, and you're like, well, we're going to need to talk. We had some parent complaints here now.
Listen, I've been through that fire, man, Chris. I've been through that fire. But you know what? In the end, here's what I will say: if you are an educator who is proficient in his or her or their craft, they can't say nothing to you.
Mm-hmm.
If you are a really good teacher, like I am, and you come to work every day, you produce the results that they're looking for, man, they can't say nothing to you because you're an asset. You are an asset.
You believe that
And
still now, though, like with fines, like there's going to be districts threatened with fines if they teach the wrong thing. Teachers are going to end up. I
mm,
think there have been a few stories already. Teachers like losing their jobs or something for having taught like a
yeah,
Black Lives Matter lesson.
I think it was in Tennessee. The teacher's name was Matthew Hahn, white teacher.
Mm-hmm.
He was
Mm-hmm.
he was teaching a poem from a sister about white supremacy, and he was pairing it with, I think, a piece from Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think a parent or somebody from the board caught wind of it, and he ends up losing his job. And this was
Wow.
a tenured teacher who ended up losing his job. And then if you go to, I think, Arizona, they're talking about finding teachers up to $5,000
Wow. Yeah.
for teaching the truth now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
And let's put that in perspective. A lot of
mm,
teachers are in the $30,000 to $40,000 range. So losing
right.
$5,000 is like it's a good reason to quit. To be very
That's
honest
that.
with you.
That's what I'm saying. If you do the math, so basically, if I get hit with this fine 8 times, that's my whole annual salary.
Mm-hmm.
That's my whole annual salary.
So you know
Like,
what? Now that I think about it, I'm glad you put it that way because you just put a fine point on the numbers. Because if you think about it, then Black History Month, you're gonna get fired. You're gonna lose all your salary in Black History Month.
come
You're gonna
on
teach
now.
you're gonna teach so many things in Black History Month that you're gonna owe money to the district. You're gonna be like, they're gonna be like, you owe us $30,000 for all these lessons this month. How ridiculous is that?
But here's the hypocrisy in all this. We just approved Juneteenth in our country.
Mm-hmm.
We
Mm-hmm.
just approved Juneteenth. And here's what's crazy. You go to Texas. Texas now, man, they're trying to do whatever to just shut everything down. Like
Yeah.
they're on that. Nah, don't say nothing about race. We don't hear nothing about
And they always have been.
anti-racism, and they've
They
always
always have
have
been.
been.
Yeah. Them
But
New
when you think
Mexico. Yeah.
right, but when you think about where Juneteenth originated, Galveston, Texas.
Yeah.
Like, but yet,
Yes.
so
Yes.
how are we gonna celebrate that as a federal holiday? But yet, the actual state from which this holiday originated is doing all these racist things. Like, it does not make sense, America. But this is
Well, and this is what I'll say about our leadership. Like
mm,
educators deserve better leadership than they have right now. Parents and community members, we deserve better leadership than we have right now. The
absolutely.
other side has great leadership. I just want to put this in perspective. Republicans, conservatives, racist, the white nationalists who want to make it the white nationalism 2.0, the Proud Boys, the Boogaloo Boys, the Tea Party, they have
Yeah.
fantastic leadership. They have leadership that couldn't be more in tune to their interests and their needs, and an incredible killing will, like the will of a killer, to make sure that their interests are taken care of and put front and center. We have the most asinine, weak, lukewarm, thus God spit them out type of leadership for our interests that I've ever seen. So the only reason you and I will talk about CRT today is because a white teacher in Seattle leaked a lesson plan to a young punk rock white progressive guy, or I'm sorry, conservative guy named Christopher Ruffo, who was looking for his next gig and what he was going to do, what story he was going to take on next, to do some right-wing punk rock journalism. And that became the story. And he has taken off. And one of the ways that he has taken off with it was he put this out there. He got on Tucker Carlson. He made a direct overture to Trump. And Trump took the bait, and created a national commission based around this and started writing executive orders. That is leadership, and that is white power, and that is the story that tells all stories about what we should be doing. And yet now we have a president who ran against that and said, I will be something different. Where's our national commission? Where's our National Truth and Reconciliation Commission on the furthering of racial progress in America, right? Where's our national commission from the Association of Social Studies teachers, the associations of math and science teachers, all of them coming together and saying, where are all of our civil rights groups? Where's the NAACP big table convening everybody from all the associations of teachers to scholars and researchers, and everybody saying, for once, we're going to have a great enlightenment and awakening by putting all the facts on the table, and we're going to create the better America, right? So while the other team is creating the smoke bomb, the fog in the room, and doing a very good job at it, because they want to stop you from decentering their advantage. And their advantage really is the textbooks being written the way that they want them written, our kids learning just a single, very facile, flat version of what it means to be a patriot in the United States, all that stuff. Where's our leadership, though? Right. Where's the leadership of teachers, civil rights groups, our president? Now I know he's a little bit busy bungling the exit from Afghanistan and putting all the women and children in that country in peril, but he could take a few minutes out to do something Trumpian, which is to announce a commission to say, we're going to go the other direction. We're going to bring America together. Because didn't he run on togetherness? Right? Now, see, I'm getting political. I'm making you be political now, Kwame.
Yeah.
But teachers are leaders in the classroom.
Yes, they are.
And they need leaders to give them cover outside of the classroom, right? And what's about to happen right now is they're not about to have that cover. They're about to, I think, in a lot of cases, be fined or at least corrected when they do wrong. Like, there are going to be parents that are going to complain about lessons. For instance, I mean, parents are already complaining about things like Black Lives Matter flags in your classroom, right? And I heard you say, like, listen, if you're a great teacher and you're like me, you're going to just like weather it and get through it. I wonder if we're not going to have a lot of teachers that are going to need to leave the classroom.
Well, I mean, that's the threat. That is the threat right now. It almost feels like Darwinism, survival of the fittest. Who can, who can remain in this racist education system long enough to dismantle and disrupt it, which is what we all try to do. And we recognize how hard it is to do it from within, because there's so many rules and regulations that are placed against us that are in alignment with white supremacy. But here's what I will say. It's going to be up to teachers to make this right. I'm of the mindset that I don't have the greatest trust in our federal government. Like, I'm not waiting for Joe Biden or Secretary Cardona to save me from what's going on in my classroom. And I'm sure there are other teachers who are in that same sentiment. Now, do I want them to listen to, our calls for help and everything else, and to dish out legislation that's going to help us do the work that we need to do for our children? Yes, but I'm not putting my eggs in all that. Um,
Hmm.
if Trump taught us anything, we have to take a much more radical approach to how we do things. And I mean, if you look at, like the squad, for instance, if you look at, AOC, Ayanna Presley, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar, like they kind of have that attitude that we kind of need, but they get pushed back within their own party,
Hmm. Hmm.
you know. But they recognize that we have to do things differently. So as educators, we have to mobilize and come together and say, you know what, um, we have to do what we need to do within our states, because as of right now, there are 28 states, more than half of our country, who's pushing legislation through the House to ban or limit the teaching of racism, the teaching of anti-racism, the the teaching of the historical contributions of um, people of color in this country. Like 28 states
Hmm.
compared to only 15 states who are doing the opposite. And that also includes your home state of Minnesota, who's trying to push for more more curriculum on like native on indigenous people,
Hmm.
through the social study standards. So like we have to like come together, and I'm going to shout out somebody who's actually doing the work, and you might want to even have her on the show. Her name is Tori Anderson Lloyd. She is an educator based in Detroit, and she actually is starting a movement called Teach the Truth Action Network. And basically, what it is she's trying to recruit a nationwide team of educators, of stakeholders. Hey, Lily, I need a new wireless plan for my business. Who care about the truth and want to put together a federal policy that's going to combat all this white supremacist anti-CRT propaganda that's been happening um, for so long. Like this is the type of leadership that we need to exhibit. And there are other people, there are other teachers who are doing things to try to make this happen. But I think we have to do it together. We got to come together and consolidate these efforts, because if we're doing it in silos, we're only going to get incremental change. And we've seen
Hmm.
what incremental change has done for us throughout history.
Nothing.
That's
I mean, it's done a
nothing.
little bit over periods
A
of
little
time.
bit,
Yeah, yeah.
small
It's
gains,
done a
but
little bit
you
for
know
us.
what I
Yeah,
mean.
yeah.
That's how they do. It's like you carry, here's the carrot. All right, you reach that goalpost. I'm going to push it back a little bit more. That's incrementalism, right?
Hmm.
And that's what prolongs, that's what extends the lifeline of whiteness, of white supremacy, and all that we're talking about right now. You know, and that's really what, if you think about, I don't know how familiar you are with interest convergence,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So when you think about interest convergence, it's basically where, as long as the interests of white folks converge with that of black folks, oh, white folks are happy. Oh, we good. As long as we get what we need, we're good. So the incentive for engaging with black folks, or just people of color in general, is white self-interest. What am
Hmm.
I gaining from this partnership? What is my incentive? Yeah.
Hmm.
Right? So we'll do a non-education example. Let's take the NBA for instance. When they were in the
I'm sorry. The
bubble in
what?
Orlando,
The what?
the NBA,
The NBA. Okay.
when they were in the bubble a couple seasons ago in Orlando, and the Bucks pretty much didn't go on the court because of what was going on there. Now the league shut down for 2 days because
Mm-hmm.
players didn't play. So when you look at all the white NBA owners, well, and Michael Jordan. And then you have the commissioner, Adam Silver. They're like, oh gosh, like these guys got to get on the court. What are we going to do? So what happened? Chris Paul, NBA, the NBPA came together, all the players came together, sat at the table with the owners and NBA leadership, and they said, you know what? In order for us to get back on the court, we need for all the arenas to become voting centers so that people can vote. We want to have, we want to have, Black Lives Matter and all these other phrases, anti-racist symbols, on our jerseys. Like that's what we want. All these owners care about is their biggest commodity, their players. Because if the players don't play, they lose money. Because guess what? You have TV deals, you have relations with different media companies, advertisement companies. They all get impacted when the players don't play. So the players recognize that. They recognize their power in that situation. But the owners also recognize that, you know what, in the end, all we want is for the players to play. Let's give them what they want. We're going to get what we want. And that's for them to be still on the court. So we just take it to the classroom. Let's talk about the invisible tax, for instance. Black and Latinx teachers, they go into the classroom. They're doing everything on their contract and extra. And I recognize this as a Black male teacher. I recognize that I was hired by my district because of the fact that I was going to be met with a quota. I recognize that I will be tokenized from time to time. I recognize that. But I also know that even though they say I'm expendable, right? I know I'm going to still be around because I produce the results that they want. But when you think about the invisible tax, the invisible tax happens because you have a lot of principals. And mind you, I think approximately 80% of our nation's public school principals are white. 80% approximately. So they're bringing us in to do work that they don't want to do. That's the incentive for them. The incentive is for them to not have to deal with those Black kids, not have to deal with them. Let me just get a Black teacher to deal with them so that I could do what I want to do, that I feel is more important, that I feel is of high priority. So even though these aren't things that are said out loud, just through their actions, we know that these are things that are happening. So I feel like as teachers, we have to recognize that we have more power than we realize. Yeah, I mean, are there teachers who will get fired through this? Sure. Are there teachers who are going to end up having to resign or retire because of this? Sure. And I don't blame them because, self-care is important. Like you got to take care of yourself first and foremost. But if we know that we could potentially get fined. Now, I taught in Massachusetts. Now, Massachusetts is pretty much neutral when it comes to where they are in this CRT mess, right? They're not even on the map right now, but there are other states that are on the map, and I feel like if we were to create some kind of I don't know what term to use, but I know like my wife, her parents from the Caribbean, so I know the Jamaicans they call like, or the people from Barbados they call it susu. So I know like a susu where all right, everybody put some money in the pot.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put some money in the pot, right? Because somebody's gonna get fined. So if everybody just contributes something, if we were to create some kind of fund,
yeah,
that's gonna protect people, from losing their jobs. Where all right, you got fined 5,000, all right, bet, boom, we'll pay that fine for you. Keep doing what you're doing. I mean, something like that. I'm not saying that will work, but we need to do
well,
something
I think
that
that's
counters
coming.
that.
I feel like the teachers
Yeah.
unions at least are saying that they want to start putting together money Like they want to start investigating how they can make sure that they protect their members who are going to get these fines or whatnot. Actually, you know what, too? This is just the way I feel like the devil works. Sometimes the devil does things that God don't like, and God just like lets you fall on your sword.
Sure.
Well, there's already a shortage of teachers in many places. There's already too few teachers that want to do the job. Um, so if governors think that they're going to start slapping teachers in districts with things that make teachers want to leave and saddle them with fines and all that type of stuff, and it's going to end well for them in terms of being able to still operate schools and still have schools and have to face parents in the next election about how dumb their policies have been in terms of driving educators out of classrooms or whatnot. Have at it. I actually really believe sometimes we can't do everything, but I believe that God doesn't like ugly. And sometimes people do things, they cut off their nose to spite their face. And I think we get mad right now because we feel like they're winning or advancing. And I like to give myself some comfort by thinking they're advancing faster towards their extinction, because that whole thing about the long arc of the universe is bent towards justice. I actually believe it. I actually believe in the end, justice and love are always going to win. It just don't look like it while you're in the middle of hate winning. Like hate
Right.
is winning some points right now. Hate is racking up some points, but there is no future in trying to destroy other people or whole groups of people. As a matter of fact, the only future in that is mutual destruction. At best for you, it's mutual destruction. At worst, it's your own destruction because you'll burn up in your own hatred. And I think that's where we're going. I think news just came out yesterday or the day before yesterday. The new census data came out for the first time. White people's numbers are down. Like the white growth is down. So this whole thing around the browning of the nation, the inevitability of browning.
Yes.
Like that, like we act like that. It's like climate change. Like it's like climate change. We act like that's not actually inevitable. Like something,
Sure.
barring some major intervention on the trend. And the only major intervention I can think of is a nasty one, like a final solution, like a German solution on it. Barring that, the nation will become non-white, majority non-white. And it will have to reckon with itself with a different reality, a new reality. Like right now, we have some probationary white people. So we're gonna have to deal, like once the real white people are decentered, we're gonna have to deal with the probationary white people,
Wow.
like the ones who have,
Probationary white people.
yeah, there's probationary, like, there's like, or we could just call them like white people on deck, like the next, group of white,
Yep.
because what whiteness has done over time, I mean, to increase their numbers, they added the Italians, and then they added the Irish when that
Yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
work, then they added Jews, and so on. And now they're starting to add people of Hispanic origin and Asians. And what'll come next after that are some immigrants who are here on tech visas. They'll become the new white people too. So they're really trying hard. They have some probationary white people. So people of color are going to have to learn how the next wave of the fight is going to be working with probationary white people. But we're eventually going to get to the point where it's enough color country. Will we have planned for it? Will we have prepared kids for it? Will they be educated enough to do it? Will they know? Like that's not a transition you make without preparing populations for it, right? And our schools right now, you have children that you see as students every day. Are they going to be prepared for this inevitable world that's going to come? Right? Are they going to know the rich stories? Is my kid going to know, have read stories about, like you mentioned, your immigrant experience of your parents and your forebears here right now? There would be a way for everybody to be ignorant about what that even looks like in terms of an experience. Are my kids going to know something about it? Are they going to have heard about it? Are they going to have read about it? Because you exist. You're here. You're Kwame.
Right.
Right? Like,
yeah, right.
And my kids and your kids are going to have to live together. So are they going to know anything about you or whatnot? This is why I respect your work. This is why I appreciate your work, because I think the people who are doing counter storytelling right now, who are developing the next story, who are actually pushing for that as a revolutionary way of getting us towards a more inclusive society or whatnot. Those are the real builders. Those are the people that are building the next reality for America. And there's not many of you, though. I'm going to say this, Kwame.
There are many. No, you're right.
There are many. You need to
We
increase
are
your
a
numbers.
rare breed. We're a rare breed. We are a
Yes.
rare breed. But you know what? I appreciate the work that you do with just parents in general, because one thing that I will say just throughout my time as an educator is you have a lot of parents who don't even recognize their power as a stakeholder, right? They don't recognize their power. And I like there are times where I'm in the IEP meetings and they're going through the IEP plans, and you have the SPED department, they're going over the minutes and all this other jargon and terminology, and you have parents who are just looking at it like, I don't know what the hell they talking about. But I'm gonna nod my head because I don't want to look stupid in front of these educators with degrees and all these credentials. And then I'm the guy that will talk to them in the parking lot, be like, nah, like you need to reread this. Go ahead and reread this plan. I don't know if this is the right plan for your child. My educated opinion. Nah, you probably should get you an advocate to challenge that. But you know what? There aren't a lot of educators who are going to do that. And there's some who want to do that, but because of the fear of losing their job security, they're not going to engage in that. So I just appreciate what you do for the parents, man, because in order for this to really go in the direction that it needs to go, we need our parents, we need our community organizers, we need our stakeholders to also, be deep in it. But we also have to equip them with the knowledge that they need so they can weaponize that to fight for change, just like we're trying to fight for change, right? Because not all of our parents are up to speed or educated about the nuances of what's going on, whether we talk about educational law, whether we're talking about hell, there are teachers who don't even know what all the educational laws are, right? So we got to do the homework. We have to do the homework. It can't just be go in and teach for 9 hours and then do the lesson plans. No, that's what they want us to do. Just be robots. We have to recognize that, honestly, we need to just shut everything down. We just need to break it all down and start over again. That's what really should happen.
Now you're speaking my language.
That's really what should happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Like whether it's homeschooling, because we have a lot more homeschools now, Black homeschools, right? Whether we have independent schools. So like I was in Philly, we had a lot of freedom schools. So, and Sharif, he can vouch to this too, like Sankofa and like so many other schools that were teaching the stuff that I'm trying to teach within this K-12 system, right? But they were doing it in their independent schools.
Yeah. And, and I know we got to wrap here. In keeping with what you say about counter storytelling, I think counter institutions is something that goes right along with that. We have to create a different narrative, a different set of scholarship, a different pedagogy, and a different delivery system for that pedagogy, which would be schools, like independent schools. These are all things that we've done before. Not we, but we, in our story and in our heritage, it has been part of our culture to have what you just said: independent Black schools, freedom schools, out of school time learning opportunities. This is something Charles Cole talks about. Dr. Cole talks a lot about, like, the village. Like, I heard you say the word, we got to do our homework. And it instantly made me think of something different than homework. It made me think of the home as work. Like the home as work, right? So like we have many different ways to free ourselves now, like educational, but we just haven't pulled them all together. Everything you just said, pull it together into a book, maybe, or into a article, or into a set of things. The home is work, out of school time as the village, the place where children learn, counter stories, and counter institutions. Like counter schools or whatnot. That, to me, I think we just came up with it, Kwame. I just think we just freed all our people.
But I like what you said. I like how you flipped that. The home as work. Like we need to cut the lawn in our own yard, because the reality is there are some probationary white people who look like you and I.
That's right.
Who we need to call in, right? So we're not going to engage in cancel culture, because cancel culture perpetuates white supremacy because it goes back
Mm-hmm,
to this idea of
mm-hmm,
perfectionism. Oh, you
mm-hmm,
made a mistake? Nah,
mm-hmm. You're disposable.
nah, you're disposable, or
That's right.
we're gonna revoke your card,
That's
right?
right.
We're
That's
gonna
right.
revoke your black card.
Well, schools are a cancel culture, right? Like if you think about black boys and black girls, how they're treated by schools, it is a cancel culture.
Oh
You get
yeah,
pushed out.
oh
That's
yeah,
all a
for
push
sure.
out is. A push out is just a canceling.
That's
You
what
know,
it
oh,
is.
you raised your voice, cancel. Oh, you got a little aggressive, uh, in air quotes, cancel. You know, we're going to cancel you to another school. Anyways, well, listen, brother, I appreciate you and this discussion. We should keep this discussion going. We
Yes,
should keep this
sir.
discussion going. We are going to win through dialogue. We're going to win through counter stories, storytelling, counter institutions that evolve. These dialogues that evolve into something material that, you know, end up with a child being in a different situation, safe harbor somewhere in the future, means that this was all worth it. All this was worth it, all
Absolutely.
this discussion. So let people know how they can find you and how they can learn more about you.
Yes, sir. So I am my social media home is Instagram. So you can find me at Kwam KWAM underscore the underscore identity underscore shaper. Yes, I know it's long. You could also type my name. Oh, right here. Type my name and it'll come right up. You could also find me on at Twitter as Identity Shaper. And yeah, those are my two main ones. And then my website for Identity Talk Consulting is Identity Talk 4, numeral 4, educators.com. So I'm out in these streets. And yeah,
Mhm.
thank you, Chris, for having me, man.
Appreciate you. We'll do it again, my brother. And to everybody who has been listening and watching today, thank you for giving us your morning, your brunch time, your time between breakfast and lunch to discuss education and the importance of us standing together for an inclusive, democratic society where our kids can learn and be prepared for the next world, the world that is passing away, the world that is dying, the world that was centered on an unjust contract between peoples. And a society that wasn't rightly related to God as it should be, thus it had no justice. That is dying. It's passing away. It's over. The gig is up on that one, and there are those last few people that want to cling to it and hang on like Rose and Leo, you know, falling off the Titanic. They want to just cling to it and freezing, and they're floating in the freezing water of that just white hot hatred of yesterday that kept us in a disorderly society that was hated by God. And we will be damned if we're going to continue it. Education is going to be our way out. It's going to be the thing that lights the candle for our kids of all races, the plurality of people and all backgrounds, to finally have an America that actually looks like the lie we were told of a all-inclusive, out of many people's one whatnot. We can have that. We don't have it now. So the only way to have it is to start building it together with people of good faith, good information, and to do it actually with education. We appreciate you guys as always. Stick with us. We will have more discussions like this coming up. And as always, thank you for all you do for our kids. We appreciate you.